The number one thing you can do off the mat to improve your performance on the mat is gonna be to get stronger. But how strong do you need to be? That's the question I'm gonna answer in today's podcast. I'm breaking down the 3 strength tests that every grappler must do to find out if they're strong enough on the mat. If you wanna make 2026 the year you get jacked and dangerous, it starts by testing your strength and following a blueprint that helps you get brutally strong for Jiu Jitsu. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Settlage Strength Podcast. It's been a minute since we podcasted last. Your boy is in the new studio, but basically pretty much right after I got locked into the new crib, I got sick. And so I was out of commission. I was super nasally, just super gross, and haven't been podcasting. But we're back to training. We're back to podcasting. So I'm super stoked that you guys are tuning in today. The biggest thing that I want to talk about in today's episode is the 3 tests of strength that I think every grappling athlete should focus on, especially now that we're kind of closing out 2025 and we're moving into 2026. Some of you guys might already have started thinking about, okay, what are my goals for next year? In 2026, what do I want to do? What do I want to achieve as a grappler? How do I want to grow? How do I want to perform better? And all that good stuff. And for me personally, I want to help as many people in 2026 get jacked and dangerous on the mat. And as I started thinking about that, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to help people get jacked and dangerous, where do we get started with that? And you can't really set proper goals if you don't know where you're currently at. And so there are 3 tests of strength that I suggest every grappler go through. I'm not just talking about grapplers who are focusing on competition. I'm talking about literally anybody that does jiu-jitsu should do these 3 strength tests. These tests, before I tell you what those tests are, it's important to know that these tests are not, they're not the end-all be-all of strength. There are other forms of strength that should be tested. There are other kinds of strength that should be tested. And these are just like 3 out of, you could think of probably like 100 tests of strength and just athleticism as a whole. And the disclaimer that I want to give is that unfortunately, I think a lot of athletes, not just grapplers, but MMA fighters, wrestlers, judo athletes, really any athlete in the combat sport realm, when we find out that there's a test of strength, we sometimes make the mistake of getting hyper fixated on that test. This test is really just to see kind of where is your strength now compared to where it was before. We don't want to train for the test, we want to train to get stronger. If you look at the NFL and the combine, I don't work with any football players. I did a long time ago. There's actually one guy, this is a funny story, there's one guy that I used to coach as a wrestler, and he also played football. And so they have like the football lift-a-thon thing, and so I was coaching him up for that. And I never played football in high school. I was like, football ain't for me, man. They're always like, Jay, you should play football. And I was like, dog, I'm 5'6", and I weigh 130 pounds. What are you talking about, me playing football? Anyways, I don't work with football players, but I am familiar enough to know that the combine is a huge aspect of pro football. So guys go through the combine, they got the scouts that watch them, and then they get drafted to these teams. The thing is, everyone knows the tests that are going to be done at the combine, so then people start training for the combine to perform well in these tests. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're a fantastic football player or they're some super freak athlete. I mean, sometimes it could mean that because there are some fantastic football players and super freak athletes that do perform well in the combine. But you look at a traditional combine test of like the 225 bench press for reps. There are people that go through full phases of training and like peaking cycles just to perform well in that test. Is that a great test of their strength? In my opinion, no. There's better ways to test strength, or I should say maybe not better, but more accurate ways to test strength. And so I bring all that up because I do want to give this disclaimer that if you're listening to this podcast episode and you're going to hear about the 3 tests that I'm going to tell you about in just a minute, I don't want you to get so fixated on only performing well in the tests. I want you to do other exercises. I want you to do other training methods and develop all types of strength, but you can kind of like rotate these 3 tests in every 12 to 24 weeks just to kind of test where you're at and see how you're progressing from phase to phase, from month to month, year to year, and things like that. So the first of these 3 strength tests that I want to talk about is a max pull-up test. The pull-up is probably one of the greatest exercises ever invented, if someone even invented it. There's some exercises that it's like, you look at them, it's like, yeah, someone definitely invented that. And then there are other ones that are just like, I think we've just been doing this since humanity even came on this planet. So is it really like an invented exercise? And the pull-up is kind of in that. For grapplers, when it comes to building upper body pull-in strength, S tier exercise is going to be the pull-up. Now, the way I quantify pull-ups is palms forward or neutral grip. If you have your palms facing your face or you have supinated hands, that is a chin-up. Those are similar exercises in that they're a vertical movement or vertical pulling movement pattern, but they are a little bit different. I am more interested in the pull-up. I think chin-ups are great, but specifically for this test, because pull-ups are a little bit harder, I suggest testing your strength with pull-ups. So on a max pull-up test, what we're going for is we're looking to have arms fully extended at the bottom position, so no bend in the elbow. Pull yourself all the way up to get your chin over the bar. If your chin doesn't cross the bar, it's not a full rep. Those are the movement standards. Arms fully extended at the bottom, coming up, chin over the bar at the top. Now, coming from CrossFit, your boy was really good at kipping pull-ups. I could do a gang of pull-ups if I was doing like butterfly kipping pull-ups. And I used to kind of like ride the fence a little bit, like, oh, butterfly pull-ups, or there's still a need for them and all that stuff. If you're a grappling athlete and you're trying to get freaking jacked and strong for Jiu Jitsu, there's really no need to be doing butterfly pull-ups. So for this particular test, when I'm testing a grappling athlete's strength, I have them do strict pull-ups. No swinging, no like kipping or trying to like, jerk your way up to get your chin over the bar or anything like that. The pull-up is just such a fantastic exercise because of how well it can develop your upper back, your forearms, your biceps, your rear delts to a certain extent, depending on where you're putting your grip, your lats. Like, it trains almost every single muscle on the backside of your upper body, which is absolutely fantastic. The other thing that is amazing about pull-ups is that it helps improve your ability to be strong with your own body weight. So I think sometimes people, I don't want to say that they get confused, but sometimes they miss the fact that doing something like a lat pull down on a machine is a completely different exercise compared to something like a pull-up. You have the lat pull down, which still trains pretty much all the same muscles that the pull-up does. The only thing that's a little bit different is if you're really weak in pull-ups and you do a lot of pull-ups, you'll find that your abs get really, really sore. You don't really get that same sensation when you're using a lat pull-down machine. But because a lat pull-down machine has a lot of like external factors where you're kind of locking yourself into a position and then producing force, that has a little bit of a different effect on your body, or maybe not effect on your body, but the type of strength that's needed to apply lots of force into a certain object is going to be a little bit different than applying lots of force to move your own body weight. And when it comes to specifically grappling strength, there are so many instances where you are going to be pulling someone closer to you. There's also going to be a lot of instances where you're pulling yourself closer to someone else. So you can't just do like lat pull downs and say like, oh, I'm strong enough for jiu-jitsu because I can rock the whole stack on a lat pull down. It's like, that's great. You should definitely try to get stronger in the lat pull down. But I'm more interested in learning about how strong are you with your own body weight? How well can you move your own body weight through space? How well can you produce force to move your own body weight? And doing a max pull-up test or a pull-up AMRAP, as many reps as possible, is a great way to test that. Now, there are 3 standards that I suggest for grapplers when it comes to pull-ups. The minimum standard is 10 pull-ups. If you're a man and you do jiu-jitsu, you got to be able to do 10 pull-ups. If you can't, that is a significant problem. That is something that I would strongly encourage you to focus a lot of time, energy, and effort to getting stronger in pull-ups to the point where you could do 10 reps. Now, I already hear what some of you guys are saying through the screen, or if you're listening to this in your headphones or in the car, you're probably saying like, but Coach Jay, I'm an ultra heavyweight. I'm a big grappler. I can't do 10 pull-ups. And to that, I would say get stronger or lose body fat, bro. Like, if you can't do 10 pull-ups as a grappling athlete, that's a red flag. That is a significant red flag in the sense that there is a gaping hole in your athleticism, specifically in your ability to control your body through space with vertical pulling movements, or with your upper back, with your biceps, with your forearms, and all that stuff. So regardless if you're a rooster weight, regardless if you're an extra calorie grappler as an ultra heavyweight, the minimum standard to aim for is 10 pull-ups. Now, if you test pull-ups and you can only get like 7 reps, it's like, okay, great. Now you know that you haven't hit that minimum strength threshold that I would recommend. And so you can just focus some of your workouts, focus some of your training to get better at doing pull-ups. You get stronger in that movement pattern. And once I go through all the other tests, I'll give some recommendations on different things you can do to improve your pull-up strength and all that stuff. But the minimum standard is going to be 10 reps. If you're an ultra heavyweight grappler and you can do 10 reps, that's freaking awesome. I'd encourage you to get stronger. If you're kind of in the light and middleweight classes and you can do 10 reps, that's pretty reasonable. If for whatever reason you can't, again, get stronger, decrease body fat. And if you're a rooster weight, like, you guys are so light, like, you guys should be rocking pull-ups, no problem. The thing with pull-ups is that a lot of times people can run into some elbow issues with pull-ups if they do them too frequently. Easiest way to fix that is just, work on the mobility of your shoulders and elbows. Change up your grips semi-frequently. You don't have to change them up all the time, but every few weeks, just try a new grip of pull-ups. And you can do like pull-ups on a straight bar with thumbs around. You can do like a monkey grip on the pull-up bar. That works too. You can do wide grip. You can do close grip. If you have access to neutral grips, that works also. You could play around with doing like some super funky grips, like mixed grip pull-ups, or I've even seen people do, maybe he does this in Rocky, but like he grabs the pull-ups almost like you get a baseball bat grip and you do pull-ups from side to side. That's pretty interesting. But for the sake of this test, when I have athletes test for pull-up strength, palms forward, palms neutral, you can go thumbs around, monkey grip, doesn't matter to me. Again, we're going for as many clean, strict reps as possible. The minimum base standard is going to be 10 reps. Minimum standard is 10 reps. The base standard, so like the standard that, if you can get 10, that's a good starting point, but I'd strongly encourage you to keep getting stronger. That base standard that I think for most grapplers is a really solid place to be when it comes to pull-up strength is going to be 15 reps. 15 reps is a really good sign that you have great control over your own body weight. You have a little bit of muscular endurance in there as well, which is also important when we're kind of going through some of these strength tests. The thing is, some people might say like, oh, like, why would I ever want to do more than like 6 reps on pull-ups if I'm just trying to, build muscle and get strong? And I see where they're coming from with that. Maybe in training, that is like when you're doing the workouts for upper back strength and you're doing heavy pull-ups and you're doing sets of 6 and maybe add a little bit of weight on there. I could see how some coaches can make that argument. For me, in my opinion, I think let's take pull-ups pretty deep into these reps, pretty high up on the rep chart, if you will, to really see how well someone can control their own body weight with just doing something like a pull-up. So the minimum standard is 10 reps, base standard is 15 reps. The elite standard, what I would consider to be like very elite pull-up strength, would be 20 reps or more. And the reason why I kind of cap it at 20 reps is because if you can do 20 reps of pull-ups, you're getting pretty far into that more muscular endurance realm. Is 20 reps of pull-ups still going to stimulate muscle growth? Yes, we stimulate muscle growth going from as low as 5 reps per set all the way up to 30 reps per set. And so if you're doing pull-ups and you're doing sets of 20, you're taking each set pretty close to failure, yeah, you're stimulating muscle growth. Is it going to be great for simultaneously stimulating strength? Probably not, because they're doing so many reps, but it's still pretty freaking awesome that you can do 20 reps of pull-ups. The thing is, I've seen a lot of grapplers get up to that 20 pull-up benchmark, and then as they continue pushing for more and more pull-ups, going up to 25, 30 reps, I'm trying to think of if I've coached anyone that's done 30 reps of pull-ups in a single set. And I'm sure there has. There's one guy I'm thinking of that was freaking crazy at pull-ups. And then I think the best I ever got was like 28 or something. I'll speak from my own experience. I've been able to do 20 pull-ups since high school. I remember crossing over that threshold when I was in high school. And even though it was awesome to go from like 20 pull-ups to 24 pull-ups to 26 pull-ups to 28 pull-ups, I really didn't see any more increases or improvements in my grappling athleticism going from 20 to 28 pull-ups. So the minimum standard for pull-up strength is going to be 10 reps. You got to be able to hit 10 reps. If you can't hit 10 reps, then I strongly encourage you to put a huge emphasis on improving your pull-up strength right when 2026 gets started, or even this week. Like get started on doing more pull-ups if you can't even do 10. A good base standard would be 15 reps. If you can do 15 reps of pull-ups, I'd say like that's pretty solid. If you want to chase that elite standard, that would be 20 pull-ups or more. Once you cross over that threshold of being able to do 20 pull-ups, it's hard for me to say that you're going to get that much additional benefits to your athleticism by going from 20 pull-ups to 25, upwards of 30, specifically for pull-ups. Once someone crosses over the 20 pull-up threshold, so we're doing one set, not 20 pull-ups in a workout or anything like that, like one set of 20 strict reps. Once someone crosses over that threshold, for me, that's a good sign that they're ready to start adding weight to the pull-up movement. If someone can only do 15 pull-ups in a single set, you do like a few sets of 6 to 8, you could build a lot of volume, sets of 6 to 8, even if you can only do 15 pull-ups. If you add weight to that and you start doing like sets of 3 to 4, maybe there's an argument there, but I'd much rather you just build up more of your body weight strength before you add load. I'm a huge fan when it comes to doing calisthenic exercises. I would much rather someone just spam those with no additional weight, get really, really good at them, so good that it's like, hey, I really don't need to be doing more reps because it's not going to give me that much additional benefit to my athleticism. Once you've reached that point, then add weight. If you can't even do 10 pull-ups, you got no business adding weight to your pull-ups. If you can't even do 15 pull-ups, I still believe you don't have any business adding weight to your pull-ups. If you can do 20 pull-ups or more, you're in a good spot. So typically how I structure it when it comes to like where someone's at. So say you're an athlete working with me and I have you do a max pull-up test. If you get less than 10 pull-ups, we go hard in the paint the first 6 weeks of working together, focusing on pull-up strength. We're doing all sorts of different exercises to try to drive up that pull-up number. If you can get more than 10, if you can get 10 reps or more, and you're like between 10 to 15, then that's a pretty good sign. It's like, okay, we're not gonna maybe go all gas no brakes on only doing pull-ups, but we're gonna sprinkle pull-ups and some other similar exercises into your training as you continue working through this training program. If you can do more than 15 pull-ups in a single set, or maybe even closer or over 20 pull-ups, usually pull-ups are not as much of a priority. We'll still do them in training, but we're not going to push them super hard. So that is the first test that I would recommend. Test your pull-ups, minimum standard, 10 reps, base standard, 15 reps, elite standard, 20 reps or more. Now, the second strength test that I would recommend for any grappling athlete that wants to get brutally strong, get jacked and dangerous, is going to be bodyweight dips. Bodyweight dips are, I think, like, they might be one of the best shoulder exercises that I've ever found. And that might sound a little counterintuitive because it's like, oh, like we're not doing like a lateral raise. How could dips be a great shoulder exercise? For grappling athletes, a lot of grapplers get injured, especially in their pecs, their shoulders, a little bit of like their bicep tendon up near the shoulder, things like that. They get into a lot of precarious positions and they suffer some injuries. Sometimes it's just like a nagging pain. Other times it's like a much more serious injury. But that tends to happen when they get load on the pec and on the shoulder in those deep ranges of motion or at those end ranges. There is a guy, he trains in Southern California. His name's Ian Daub, I think. He competed at Nogi Worlds just a few weeks ago, and I felt so bad. He was watching one of his matches, and he tore his pec in the match. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like that sounds awful. You could hear it too on the audio. It's freaking nasty. Yeah, it sucks. Tearing your pec is terrible. It's like one of the worst injuries that I could think of. But that's not to say that like if Ian did more dips that it would have prevented his pec from being torn. I have no idea. I'm not making that claim. But that is just an example of our pecs and our shoulders get stressed in these really intense positions as we're grappling, and where injuries tend to happen the most is lots of load being applied on the pec and the shoulder at these end ranges. And building up strength in the dip exercise is a great way to specifically train the pecs and the shoulders to get stronger in that deep range of motion. And so when it comes to testing strength as a grappling athlete, especially upper body strength, there's a lot of other stuff that we can do. Like we can do floor press, we can do bench press, we can do overhead press. All of those things are great, and maybe I'll do another episode about specific barbell lifts that you could use to test your grappling strength. But I'm more interested in saying, okay, how well can you move your own body weight through space? How well can you produce force with your own body weight? And how good is the mobility of your upper body? When we do things like floor press and bench press, those are fantastic strength exercises, but the range of motion is a little bit limited. And so I'm more interested in saying, okay, if someone works through a full range of motion dip, where they start with their arms fully locked out at the top, and then when they go down into the bottom position, their shoulder dips below the point of their elbow, that's what I would consider full range of motion. If someone can work through that full range of motion, how many reps can they do? So the minimum standard for dips is going to be the same as pull-ups. It's going to be 10 reps. If you're a grappling athlete, and whether you compete, whether you don't compete, if you can't do 10 bodyweight dips working through a full range of motion, that's a problem. And there may be several reasons why you can't do it. It may be because you don't have the mobility to get down into that deep range of motion. It may be because you have some elbow pain or you have some shoulder pain that's preventing you from doing that many reps. It may just be that you're weak, and that sometimes sucks to hear, but you may just need to get stronger. If you're a ultra heavyweight grappler, you might just be carrying too much body fat and you need to lose some body fat to get better at this exercise. So dips are a very strong, no pun intended, litmus test for grapplers' upper body strength and mobility. And that's a huge part of why I'm such a huge fan. So minimum standard is going to be 10 reps. If you can do 10 reps, awesome. Keep getting stronger in the dip, but just know that like, okay, I crossed the minimum threshold. Same thing that similar to what I said with pull-ups. If you can't do 10 dips, yeah, I would focus the next 6 weeks to like really building strength in that movement pattern because of how much benefit it's going to have for your overall athleticism. The base standard for dips is going to be 20 reps. Some of you might be asking like, oh, why isn't it just the same as pull-ups? Pull-ups are just harder than dips. Like you think about doing a push-up compared to a pull-up, it's way easier. Not only is it because some of your body weight isn't like all your body weight's hanging on the pull-up bar. When you do a push-up, you still have part of your feet and legs on the ground. The leverages are a little bit different. But typically pressing movements are going to be a little bit easier than pulling movements. Most people are quite a bit stronger in pressing movements compared to pulling movements. You look at someone's max bench press, and it's like, oh, I can bench 275, 315, whatever. And then you ask them like, okay, what's your best chest supported row? And they're like, 185, 205. So most people they're just a lot stronger doing pressing exercises compared to pulling exercises. And so to account for that, that's why the minimum standard for dips is set at 10 reps. Base standard is going to be set at 20 reps. Again, if you can do 20 reps on dips, that's fantastic. You can still stimulate muscle growth with working sets of 20 because we can stimulate muscle growth with 5 reps, as low as 5 reps per set, all the way up to 30 reps per set. Now, the elite standard for bodyweight dips is going to be 30 reps. And with 30 reps, it's similar to the elite standard with pull-ups where it's like, okay, if an athlete can do more than 30 bodyweight dips, it's like how much more athleticism gains are you going to get by going from 30 to 40 or from 40 to 50? I think the best I think my best set of dips ever, I think was like 34, maybe 35. And again, like I did a lot of body weight training when I was younger. So I feel like that helped a lot with kind of building a good base of calisthenic strength. But I remember like I crossed over that 30 rep threshold and I just kept pushing on those dips. And I didn't really get that much additional benefit to my grappling athleticism going from 30 dips to 35 to whatever, maybe 35 is the absolute most. So with that being said, minimum standard for dips is going to be 10 reps. Base standard is going to be 20 reps. If you hit that minimum standard, it's a really good idea to keep pressing for more strength, to keep pressing for more gains in the dip movement, and try to push it all the way up to 20. If you can do 20 or more, keep dips into your training program because it's just such a fantastic exercise for building strength at those bottom ranges. I did dips. What day did I do dips? It wasn't yesterday. It might have been 2 days ago. And I still am so sore. Like I haven't done dips in a while, but I'm pretty wrecked from dips. But all that being said, dips are a fantastic exercise. If you can do at least 20 dips, that's really solid. That's a great base of strength as a grappling athlete, especially if you're working through a full range of motion where you're building that strength in the tissues of the shoulders and the pec at that end range at the bottom. And then also, making sure you're working through full range of motion, locking out at the top and all that stuff. And then the elite standard, one more time, is 30 reps. If you can rock out 30 reps of dips in a single set, that is freaking crazy. Now, the third and final test is going to be something for the lower body. There's a lot of stuff that we can do for the lower body when it comes to building grappling strength. And it was an exercise that wasn't too popular until knees over toes guy came around. And I remember way back in the day when I first heard about the Nordic curl, before knees over toes guy, I was like, I have no freaking clue how people even can do this exercise. This exercise seems impossible. Every time I tried it, I just would fall flat on my face, or I'd try from the bottom, try to like curl myself up. And each time I'd engage my hamstrings and I'd get like the nastiest cramp in my hamstrings and I'd just face plant all over again. But then Ben Patrick, knees over toes guy, that guy came onto the scene and he was preaching a ton, and it still does, I think, about the benefits of Nordic curls and how awesome Nordic curls are for building up pretty incredible hamstring strength. You can almost think of the Nordic curl as the pull-up for the lower body. You are taking 100% of your body weight and moving it through a full range of motion with a limited amount of muscle groups. What's also really cool about the Nordic curl is that it hits your hamstrings in a little bit of a different way compared to other leg curl variations. So if you do like a machine leg curl or you do a banded leg curl, you can light up your hamstrings pretty good and you can build really big hamstrings doing that. However, the Nordic curl, because I think it has something to do with like the physics and the leverages. So like when you do a machine leg curl, your upper body is fully locked in and then you're only moving your shins and your heels. You're pulling your heel to your butt. Compared to a Nordic curl where your heels and your shins are fully locked in and you're lowering your entire body and then you have to pull yourself back up. It feels way different. And the way that I do Nordic curls, I feel it a ton in my lower hamstring, which for me, I think has been great for just improving the overall strength and structural stability of my knees. I heard this a long time ago when I was first getting into strength and conditioning. I heard Louis Simmons and a couple other people, they said like, if you have knee pain, it's because you got weak hamstrings. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was doing tons of hamstring work. I was doing tons of banded leg curls, tons of machine leg curls, all sorts of hamstring stuff, but I wasn't doing Nordic curls. And so when I originally got turned on to Ben Patrick's content and started doing Nordic curls, dude, I'm telling you, I felt like my hamstring strength went through the freaking roof. And not only did my hamstring strength go through the roof, I felt like my grappling strength went through the roof in a crazy, crazy way. So when we look at the angles of the knees, when we're doing these like leg curl motions or pulling our heels to our butt, in grappling, we're going to get into different scenarios where we have to pull our heel to our butt in a very short range of motion. Then we also have to pull our heel to our butt in a very long range of motion. So for example, I was training yesterday and I got into a triangle choke position. So once you already have the triangle choke set up, you are pulling your hamstring or you're pulling your heel to your butt, but it's not working through a very far range of motion or a very large range of motion. You're kind of taking it almost like, imagine my bicep was my bicep femoris, which is your hamstring. You're just squeezing those last couple inches to finish the triangle choke, as opposed to something like guard retention, where your legs might be extended a little bit more and you have to reach and kind of catch someone's body with your heel, where your hamstring is in a more lengthened position. And then from there, you have to be able to curl and produce enough force to get the desired effect, whether you're retaining guard in a way to like invert and enter into the legs, or retaining guard just so that way they don't get around your hip line, whatever you may be doing. But you are using your hamstrings in a lot of different ways in jiu-jitsu, and if you only focus on doing things like leg curls and banded leg curls, you're not going to be able to fully develop the hamstrings in a way that's going to be best as a grappling athlete. And that is why, to circle back, that is why I'm such a huge fan of keeping the Nordic curl as one of these 3 main strength tests. So when it comes to the Nordic curl, the minimum standard is going to be 1 rep. 1 rep. If you can do 1 rep of a Nordic curl, that's freaking awesome. However, that 1 rep is going to be really tough. I remember it took me, I could do lots of glute ham raises, which is an exercise that's similar to a Nordic curl, but not entirely the same. I could do tons of glute ham raises. I did lots of machine leg curls, lots of banded leg curls, and I couldn't get a Nordic curl. And it took a lot of specific work to get that very first rep of that unassisted Nordic curl. But what was really cool about that is once I got that very first rep, I kind of unlocked a lot more reps. So if you can do 1 Nordic curl and that's it, like you can't do 2, you're probably pretty close to getting 2 or 3 Nordic curls if you just keep training it. It's pretty crazy how quickly you can make progress in that movement, where I think like within a year, I went from not being able to do a single Nordic curl to then closing out the year, I think with 12 or 13 reps on a Nordic curl AMRAP. And then shortly thereafter, I freaking got my knee blown apart at Jiu Jitsu, so that freaking sucked. But all that being said, I think what was really what really saved me a lot was that I think my knee injury would have been way worse if my hamstrings weren't as strong. I think if I still couldn't do a Nordic curl, but could still do tons of leg curls, and I had I don't want to say a muscular imbalance in the hamstrings, but you can almost think of it as like you have a weak lockout on your bench. It's like, oh yeah, you're really strong pressing the weight up off your chest, but you're a little bit weak in your lockout. That is a weakness that might come back to bite you in the future. And so for me, I felt like, man, I got really strong hamstrings and all these other movements, just not in the Nordic curl. So I got to focus on that. I got to build up strength in that movement so that way I can get these rocked out, super strong hamstrings. And I think just doing that year's worth of work, working on my hamstrings like that, I think it really saved me when I injured my knee. Not that if I could have done 20 Nordic curls, it would have prevented the injury. I don't think that's true either, but I got injured and I had a very successful recovery, and I ended up being okay. Took a long time to rehab the damaged ligaments and all that stuff, but I think it would have been way more difficult if I didn't have that hamstring strength already. So when it comes to the Nordic curl, minimum standard is going to be 1 Nordic curl. The base standard is going to be 3 Nordic curls. Again, if you are a bigger athlete and you got a lot of body weight you got to do on that Nordic curl. If you're saying Coach Jay, I can't do a Nordic curl, I'm an ultra heavyweight. It's look, man, you got to figure it out. You got to figure out a way to either decrease body fat to make yourself lighter, get shredded, and or get stronger and just keep building up those hamstrings. Minimum standard, 1 rep, base standard, 3 reps. Elite standard for grappling athletes in particular, I would say is 6 reps or more. If you can do at least 6 Nordic curls, that is awesome. There have been a couple athletes that I've coached in the past that got to that point on Nordic curls, and it was really, really cool to see. And again, in my own personal experience, I went up to 6 Nordic curls, and then I hit 9 Nordic curls, and then right before my knee injury, like literally a week and a half before, I did, I think I did 12 or 13 reps on the Nordic curl. And the chase and the pursuit to go from getting at least 6 Nordic curls and driving that up to getting 12 or 13, I didn't see that many improvements in my overall grappling athleticism. I think one thing I didn't do is I didn't do many weighted Nordic curls or like tempo Nordic curls. So if I had to do it all over again, I think I would have done that, where it's like, hey, like you got 6 Nordic curls, now let's add like a little bit of some eccentric overload, or maybe we add some tempo work where you're doing like 2 reps of Nordic curls, but you have to hold at the bottom position for like 5 seconds on each rep or something crazy like that. So Nordic curls are fantastic. It's a great way to build up brutally strong hamstrings, which you got to have strong hamstrings if you want to be a good grappler. Honestly, you need a strong posterior chain as a whole. The posterior chain, the line of muscles running from like the base of your neck down to your calves, really that is going to be the center of all athletic movements that you do on the mat. Maybe not all, but at least like 90% of them, right? And you can't be a strong grappler if your posterior chain is weak. So doing things like pull-ups, that's going to help your posterior chain. Doing things like Nordic curls, that's going to help your posterior chain. So just to review the 3 strength tests that I would recommend you do soon to kind of see where you're at with your grappling strength. Max pull-ups, strict. Arms start fully locked out at the bottom. Chin goes over the bar at the top. A minimum standard is 10 reps. Base standard, 15 reps. Elite standard, 20 reps or more. Next to exercise is going to be dips. Arms start fully locked out at the top. Dip down so that way your shoulders dip below the point of your elbow at the bottom. Minimum standard is going to be 10 reps. Base standard is going to be 20 reps. Elite standard is going to be 30 reps. And then lastly, for the lower body, we got Nordic curls. Minimum standard for Nordic curls, 1 solid rep. Base standard for Nordic curls, 3 reps. Elite standard is going to be 6 reps. Now, if you want to be jacked and dangerous in 2026, you got to make sure that you have a plan. You can't just like test these things and be like, well, I did okay on some of those tests and I did pretty terrible in others, and I guess I'm just going to get out of here. You have to have some sort of blueprint or some sort of plan on how you're going to continue to get stronger in those movement patterns. So some of these progressions, I guess you could call them, are going to work for really anyone at any point, whether they're minimum, base, or elite, and you feel like, yeah, I got 22 pull-ups, I want to get up to 25 pull-ups. A lot of these things can be helpful. So for pull-ups, one of my favorite progressions for pull-ups is going to be something I just randomly called the 50% progression. So the way this works is you're going to do a pull-up AMRAP. So say like tomorrow, you go to the gym and you're like, okay, I listened to the Settlage Strength Podcast. Coach Jay was talking about how, got to do these tests to see where I'm at Jiu Jitsu. I'm going to do these tests to test my grappling strength. Now what do I do? So say you do that test, and say on pull-ups, you get, for simple math, we'll say 10 reps. What I want you to do is I want you to get 3 times as many reps, but do them at 50% of the reps. So if you could only do 10 reps and your all-time best set of pull-ups was 10 reps, what I want you to do is in your pull-up workouts, I want you to do 30 reps total for the entire workout. So that's 3 times as many reps as you did on your test. But I want you to do them in sets of 50% of your AMRAP. So what's 50% of 10? That's going to be 5 reps. So what does that look like? If you can only do 10 pull-ups, your pull-up workouts are going to look like doing 30 reps total for that workout. And I want you to do them in sets of 5. So that's 6 sets of 5. So being able to do 6 sets of 5, resting as needed between sets, should be pretty doable. Then from there, what you do is, every week as you're kind of adding more, or you're using progressive overload each week, you just add 1, maybe 2 reps per set. So in week 1, you do 30 reps total for sets of 5. The week after that, you're still doing 30 reps total, but maybe on a few of those sets, you do them for sets of 6. Or if you're feeling really, really good on one of those days, Like maybe on the very last set, you go for 7 reps or something like that. You pretty much follow that progression, take rest weeks, not rest weeks, but just like lower intensity weeks of training as needed. You can basically follow that progression all the way up until you hit a PR. And so what's really cool about this is that you're building a ton of training volume, you're building a ton of strength at some lower intensities, but the volume is getting higher. And what that looks like is that pretty soon you're doing 30 reps by basically just doing 3 sets of 10. And if you can do 3 sets of 10, the last time you test, or compared to the last time that you tested your AMRAP, you already know that you're going to hit a PR, so you might as well just run it again. So that is the 50% progression. That works for pull-ups, that works for dips. The hard part is that kind of progression doesn't necessarily work well for Nordic curls, because if you have your Nordic curl test and you can't even do one complete Nordic curl, how do you take 50% of nothing? It's like I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, it's like in Sandlot when he's making s'mores and he's like, you want some more? And he's like, I haven't had anything yet. And he's like, no, do you want some more? And he's like, I haven't eaten. How can I have some more or nothing? So if you can't do 1 rep of a Nordic curl, there are some other progressions that I would recommend for you. But say you can get 2 reps or 3 reps on the Nordic curl. You can take the same approach where it's like, hey, I got 3 reps of Nordic curls. I want to be able to do more than 6 reps. How would you go about that? Okay, 3 reps, 3 times 3 is going to be 9, so you need to get 9 reps of Nordic curls. What's half of 3? That's 1.5. You can't really cut Nordic curls in half. So what you could do is you can just pick like, I can do 9 singles, or I can do maybe 4 sets of 2 and then 1 last single after that. Just figure out whatever works best for you. But again, we're building up work capacity. We're using an increase in training volume to get stronger at some of these movements. So that is the 50% progression. Some of the other progressions I have here or some other ways that you can build strength in these movements are by just adding them into your warm-up sets. When I was coaching the AM crew back in the day, I pretty much always tried to have pull-ups in every single warm-up or dips in every single warm-up. So if we were doing like a max effort upper workout, we're gangstering out on floor press, gangstering out on dumbbell bench press, doing like heavy bent over rows and dumbbell pullovers and stuff like that. In that warm-up, I'd have them do a few sets of pull-ups. Now, some guys would do a lot of pull-ups in their warm-up because they were really good at them and really strong. Other guys, not so much. So for myself, I would do something like, it's just a warm-up, so I'm not trying to go crazy, but I would do like 3 sets of 10 or something like that. For someone else that struggled with pull-ups, I would say, hey, I want you to do 3 sets of 5 if you can. And if that's too challenging, then use a band. Or maybe even just do a couple pull-up isometric holds at the very top, or something like that. Now you can mix pull-ups, dips as part of your upper body warm-ups. Doing Nordic curls as part of your lower body warm-up is some crazy work because Nordic curls they're just so difficult. So maybe I wouldn't necessarily suggest doing a full-on unassisted Nordic curl in your warm-up, but you could do some assisted Nordic curls. You could do some partial range of motion Nordic curls. You could do like a glute ham raise, which is another fantastic exercise. It's very similar to a Nordic curl, but you kind of have your feet wedged into these pads. And it makes it a little bit easier than the Nordic curl because the squish of the pad gives you a little bit better leverages, and then you also have a back plate to press your toes into to kind of engage your calves a little bit more. But you can mix those things into your warm-ups to sneak in a little bit of extra training volume. When it comes to pull-ups specifically, one thing that I found to be really beneficial for helping an athlete improve their pull-up strength is going to be heavy single-arm pull-downs and heavy dumbbell pullovers. You do heavy single-arm pull-downs for sets of 4 to 6 reps. That's a great way to build up the strength of your forearms, your grip, and your lats, and just your upper back overall. You get a little bit of rear delt in there too. But what's cool about that is that you can really identify whether you have a weakness from one side or the other. So if on your right arm, if you're right-handed, and you can rock like a 80 or 100 pound single arm lat pull down for 4 to 6 reps. And then you go on the left side and it's like, I can't even get one. You got to drop it down to like 60 pounds. That is a sign that's like, man, I'm really overcompensating on pull-ups with my right side. I got to get stronger on my left side to get better at pull-ups. The other thing that you can do specifically for pull-ups is going to be the dumbbell pullover. The dumbbell pullover is an old school bodybuilding exercise that came from the golden era of bodybuilding. And it's not only a great exercise to strengthen your lats. They say it can also be like a chest exercise. They call it like your chest of lats or something. But you're really getting into that serratus. You think about anytime you're snapping someone down or anytime you shoot in on a deep single leg and someone sprawls out and you kind of like suck their leg back in, you're using a lot of your lats or using a lot of your serratus to do that. And the dumbbell pullover is fantastic for building strength in that movement pattern. The other thing that's cool about the dumbbell pullover is that it's a great mobility exercise. It's great for kind of opening up your T-spine, kind of improving T-spine extension. And so doing heavy dumbbell pullovers is not only going to build brutally strong lats, but it's also going to help improve your overhead mobility and T-spine mobility. And kind of combining those two things together, the dumbbell pullover and the single arm lat pull down and a couple workouts over the course of a month or so can be a great way to gradually increase or contribute to increasing your total number of pull-ups. Now, when it comes to dips, there are some exercises that I found to be helpful. The first one is going to be ring push-ups. Ring push-ups are awesome because you really can work through a full range of motion, but you have a lot more control on how much load you want to put on the tissues of your pecs and your shoulders at that bottom position. So if you feel like, man, like I can't even get 10 bodyweight dips because like there's just so much strain and pressure on my pecs and shoulders, doing something like a ring push-up can allow you to get in more training volume at an appropriate load in a similar movement, so that way you can continue to build up the strength of your pecs and shoulders at that end range, which will contribute to you being able to perform better when you do dips. Now, the other exercise that helps with that is full range of motion dumbbell bench press. Full range of motion dumbbell bench press is like one of my all-time favorite exercises. I love it. It's so awesome. And part of the reason why is because similar to a ring push-up compared to a regular push-up, a ring push-up allows you to kind of turn your hands, get your hands out of the way so you can get deep into that bottom position. When you do a push-up on the floor, your chest hits the floor gets in the way. When you do a barbell bench press, the barbell gets in the way. When you do a dumbbell bench press, you're able to turn the dumbbells out and kind of move them off to the side a little bit so you can work through a larger range of motion. Building up strength in the dumbbell bench press, especially working through a full range where you're getting that big stretch at the bottom, is going to have fantastic carryover to your dips. The issue with dumbbell bench press that I see a lot of I should say the mistake with dumbbell bench press that I see a lot of grappling athletes make is that as they get stronger, I think they forget that the size of the dumbbell gets bigger. So if you're someone who's benching 25-pound dumbbells, you kind of are working through a full range of motion because they're not that big. You bench 100-pound dumbbells, the heads of those things are enormous, and they're going to stop pretty short if you don't turn your hands and get the heads of the dumbbells out of the way. So make sure that when you're doing dumbbell bench press, you're working through a full range of motion and you're turning the handles out of the way to really get that deep stretch at the bottom. Now, some other exercises that can help with Nordic curls are going to be partial range of motion Nordic curls. That was a big unlock for me when I was struggling with these. I went to a Ben Patrick seminar way back in the day, and he had us do partial range of motion Nordic curls, where you put like a med ball or you stack up like a bunch of plates, so that way you're only lowering yourself down just like a couple degrees. Like, I think at first, maybe the lowest I went was 45 degrees, maybe. And he was saying like, yeah, like once you find a range of motion that you can still be strong in, just build up the volume in that range of motion. And so I did, and it was really, really helpful. So for like, I think a month, not every workout, but most workouts, I do some Nordic curls. I do partial ranges of motion, just trying to own that range of motion. And when I felt like I was getting stronger and that it was getting a little bit too easy, I would just decrease the range of motion a little bit and go from there. So partial range of motion Nordic curls can be fantastic. You can also do full range of motion assisted Nordic curls, where you are hanging on to a band on your back, or you have, I've seen some people do it where they have like a PVC pipe out in front of them, and they kind of like walk down the PVC pipe with their hands, and then as they curl themselves up, they give themselves a little bit of assistance by walking themselves back up. That can definitely work. You could also do push-up Nordic curls, which I think the thing with push-up Nordic curls is that they're just a little bit harder to quantify how much assistance you're getting. So you try to control the Nordic curl as much as you can on the way down. When you kind of hit that point where your hamstrings give out and you just are going to face plant, you catch yourself in a push-up position, and then you do an explosive push-up to help you get started in pulling yourself back up. I think there's a time and place for those things, but I think the best Nordic curl variations to help you get your first Nordic curl are going to be partial range of motion unassisted and full range of motion assisted in some way. I think those are a little bit more quantifiable, and you can make better progressions in how you're scaling up that exercise to get to your full first Nordic curl. Now, the last thing for Nordic curls, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, that's going to be high volume glute ham raises. I'm a huge fan of the glute ham raise. If you can't do a Nordic curl, try to get your first full unassisted glute ham raise. If you can do glute ham raises, but you can't do a Nordic curl, build up that volume. Try to get not as many reps as possible on the glute ham raise, but get to a point where it's like, yeah, I can easily crank out sets of 20 on the glute ham raise, and that will, in a way, help carry over to your Nordic curl strength. Now, those are the 3 strength tests that I would recommend that you get started on fairly soon as we kind of move into 2026. If your goal is to be jacked and dangerous on the mat, starting with these 3 strength tests can be a great way to assess, okay, how strong am I for jiu-jitsu? I don't ever think that there's a such thing as too strong. No one ever lost because they were too strong. No one ever got injured because they were too strong. But it is a good idea to find out, am I strong enough as a grappler? Now, that's not to say that, like, you know, if you do less than 10 pull-ups or you can't do a Nordic curl, that means you shouldn't do jiu-jitsu or you shouldn't wrestle or anything. That's not what I'm saying. These are just tests to kind of highlight where some of your strengths and weaknesses may be. And then based off that, you can make more informed decisions in your training. So if you can do tons of pull-ups, you're like, man, my pull-ups are freaking awesome. But then you do dips and you're like, I can't even do 10 dips because my shoulder pain is killing me. If that's the case, then that's an immediate highlight of like, man, I got to address this early. I got to address this soon, first thing in January. I don't want this thing to plague me throughout a whole nother 12 months. Address that now. So use these 3 strength tests as a way to kind of assess where you're at and also give you good direction on how you're going to train going forward, especially in 2026. Now, the last thing that I want to go over is that we got a couple questions from the audience. I guess some of these are from my own training partners at Jiu Jitsu. Sometimes when they have good questions, I'll be like, oh, that's a really good question. I should probably talk about that on the podcast. So first question is from my boy Walker. His question is, how do I know when I am at my working sets? So this is a really interesting question that a lot of new lifters have. And I think sometimes when someone's been in the iron game long enough, they've been lifting their face off for a while, you kind of just forget how you even find your working set because it just comes so naturally. It's almost like in jiu-jitsu, you ask a black belt a question sometimes, like, how do I get out of an arm bar? And they're just like, what are you talking about? You just don't let them control your arm. And you're like, okay, yeah, good talk, coach. That was super helpful. I'm really glad that you gave me that wisdom. But I think it's true. I think sometimes if you've spent a lot of time in the gym, you forget, like, yeah, how do I figure out what my working sets are? So for those of you who are maybe a little bit newer to the gym or are trying to figure this stuff out, I would say that the best way to determine your working set is based off the intention of the workout. And this is what I was telling Walker earlier. I was telling him, like, hey man, like, match the intention of the workout with your working sets. And once those 2 things match, you're at your working set. So for example, say you had a workout where your goal was to lift some heavy ass weights to get stronger. You're gonna start with an empty bar as part of a warm-up, and then you add a little bit of weight. and you lift the weight and you're like, that wasn't difficult at all. It's like, well, does that match the intent of the workout where I'm trying to grind against some heavy ass weights and get stronger? No, it doesn't match the intention of the workout. So I'm going to keep moving up in weight. And then you eventually do hit that point where it's like, man, like I'm straining through these reps. I've hit my first working set. That is going to be different compared to if your intention was to develop speed and explosive power. So if you're doing something like a speed bench press, the intention for the workout is to get faster, to stimulate more explosive power throughout your body so that way you can be violently explosive on the mat. The way we do that is oftentimes we're using lighter weights than what we would use if we were doing traditional strength work. So just because in your strength workout you worked up to 225 for 5 reps and that was like, okay, that is a solid, that's a solid working set for me. If you're going to do speed and explosive power work, you may only have like 135 or 155 on the bar because the intention of that workout is to be fast and explosive. So you would warm up same way you would if you're doing strength work. You do a few reps, you're like, man, I feel pretty good. I'm moving fast, I'm moving explosive. You keep adding a little bit more weight, and eventually you get to a point where it's like, I moved fast and really explosive, but if I add more weight, I think I'm gonna be slowing down too much. If that's the case, then that's how you know you're at your working set. So again, for those of you who struggle to find out, like, does this count as a working set? Does this not? Remember, you just want to match it to the intention of the workout. And I'd also say that it really helps just more time in the gym. As you keep lifting, as you keep lifting heavy and rolling hard, you're going to get more and more experience on where your working sets begin and kind of how to establish that in each and every workout that you do. Next question is from Joel Wong. He says, why is it that ever since I started Jiu Jitsu, my legs have gotten smaller? That is a super fascinating question. I don't think I've ever heard that before, but honestly, it's probably just because you stopped training them. That's like really the only reason why. If you had really giant legs because you were doing lots of powerlifting, you were bodybuilding, you're doing tons of heavy squats, heavy lunges, and then you do jiu-jitsu and you kind of stop doing all that, it makes sense that your legs would get smaller. The other thing that it could be too is that if you were a bigger fella, if you had excess body fat on you, especially in your legs, and you do jiu-jitsu, you eat in a caloric deficit, you start decreasing body fat, your legs would also get smaller then too. So that's kind of the only thing I can attribute to that. But regardless of how big your legs are, try to get them as strong as freaking possible. This is a comment that I saw last week that I thought was so funny. This is from Lee Garfield. His only comment, he said nothing else but too much talking on a podcast, which is hilarious. I thought that was really funny. On a more serious note, we got a question from, pretty much the same question from Travis Ramirez and Is the Illest. That's pretty cool. That's a cool YouTube handle. Their question pertains to how does strength training and conditioning training change as you get closer to competition? So over the last couple podcast episodes, I gave some blueprints on how to build like a solid base of strength as a grappling athlete. And I also gave blueprints on how to maintain strength if you're busy during the holidays and stuff like that. And not just strength, but also conditioning as well. And that's a great question. Like, how does your strength training, how does your conditioning training change as you get closer and closer to competition? The biggest thing is that as you're prepping for competition, skill development, or not skill development, but the skills training that you do on the mat is going to increase in volume and intensity. The stuff that you do in the gym is going to decrease in volume intensity. And that's not to say that you should get rid of your strength training during training camp. That's not what I'm saying at all, but it's just going to change quite a bit. And so this is a topic that is probably best saved for a full other podcast episode, but the short answer would be, as you get closer and closer to competition, you want your workouts to be a little bit more intense, but not have as much training volume. So if you're 3 weeks out or 2 weeks out from a jiu-jitsu competition, instead of doing like a traditional 5 sets of 5 on squats that would really, cook you pretty good for a few days afterwards, maybe just work up to a 5 rep max, hit like one really, really heavy set of 5, do maybe 1 or 2 other exercises for the lower body, and then just dip out of the gym. There's some other things that you can do with specific peaking protocols, which if you're a member of the Strength Matrix, you can check out the Strength Matrix Vault. And inside the Strength Matrix Vault, I have my competitors, the Strength Matrix Competitors Guide, but I also have the Bracket Smasher program and the Podium Ready training program. The Podium Ready training program is a 3-week peaking phase where we do some very specific workouts with something called French contrast training, which is really to kind of like stimulate the, not that you're stimulating like the last little bit of gains right before you go into competition, but what you are doing is you're stimulating your body to kind of be at its peak and be able to, recruit everything that it can to perform its best in competition. You want to be as best prepared for competition as possible, and doing something like the French contrast method can help kind of potentiate some of the strength, some of the explosive power. It could, I guess, in a way, potentiate some of the conditioning effects or your conditioning abilities as you get closer to competition. So that goes for strength and it goes for conditioning. As you get closer to competition, the intensity is going to get a little bit higher and the volume is going to drop down a little bit. Now, the other thing that's important to note for competition is that you also want to make sure that as you're getting closer to competition, your training in the gym becomes more and more specific to the kind of stressors or the kind of demands for that competition. So No-Gi Worlds just happened very, very recently, and I was working with one athlete. He was a he still is a brown belt, and he competed at Master Worlds, and he unfortunately gassed out, and he lost, I think, in the quarterfinals. Like he didn't even make it to the podium, which was really tough. And so at Masters Worlds, he reached out to me and he's like, "Dog, I just gassed out at Master Worlds today. I need your help because I'm trying to freaking win No-Gi Worlds." And so I'd never met him before. Talked to him over Zoom, get to know him a little bit. And he was telling me about some of his training and things like that. And he's like, "Look, man, I only got 8 weeks before No-Gi Worlds. I got to fix this conditioning problem." And so what we did was like, hey, ideally, we could spend a year working on your conditioning where all areas of your conditioning improve. And you build like this really robust conditioning engine, so to speak. However, we don't have that much time. We only have 8 weeks. So the conditioning workouts that we're going to do are going to be hyper specific to not just your individual strengths and weaknesses, but also the physical demands of No-Gi Worlds, where he competes in the Masters division. So those are 5-minute matches. And we had a very specific 8-week conditioning protocol that we ran through to get him prepared for No-Gi Worlds. And again, just like I mentioned before, as it got closer to competition, intensity started to creep up a little bit, volume started to drop off a little bit. So is the realist and Travis, I hope that answers your guys' question. Everyone else who dropped a question, thank you so much. When you guys ask questions, it's like the funnest thing for me. I love being able to help out. I love being able to help you guys get brutally strong, pack on slabs of muscle, and build conditioning that never gasses out. If you guys want to get it kick-started in enhancing your grappling athleticism, check out the 30-day Grappler Accelerator training program at thestrengthmatrix.com/grappler. We definitely have over 2,000 people that have ran through the program. We have maybe 2,500 people that have ran through the program, which is freaking awesome to see. I love it. The more people that I can help perform their best on the mat just makes me so happy. So if you're interested in kickstarting your grappling athleticism, check out the Grappler Accelerator training program, thestrengthmatrix.com/grappler. Lift heavy, roll hard. Catch y'all later. Peace.